All right, everybody, we're back and we're sitting in with actor, producer, news anchor, and right now a very important businessman because I can't wait to tell you about some of the things that this very important man is doing right here in the city of Las Vegas. But before we go that far, I read something about a little kid who had a dream, and 10 years later, that dream became a reality. So
Whoa.
I want to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, that's deep. I usually have to prompt people about that. When I was about 13, actually, I already had the unction, if you will, to pursue a broadcast career. I was in junior high school at the University of Chicago, and I had this dream that I would at some point be on television. I saw myself doing
TV.
television,
Wow.
doing news, and this, and understand that I understood media and the power of media because of what my parents had done and led me into prior to that. They were community activists. My father, an attorney, the first black attorney at Chicago Title and Trust Company, ultimately became the chief title officer of Chicago Title and Trust Company, and later became a Cook County Circuit Court judge.
Yes.
And ran an organization during that period called the Woodlawn Organization, which was one of the local community-based organizations that formed Operation Breadbasket.
Operation Push.
And Operation Push thereafter.
Yes.
And so I was involved to the extent that whenever there was a picket line, Mom and Dad were on it, I was on it too. If somebody's going to sit in somewhere,
that's amazing.
People would say I'd be among the folks sitting down. When Operation Breadbasket began, Dad, of course, and Mom were involved, and we had these political meetings in our basement. People who were trying to be candidates or were candidates, or organizational meetings or community meetings. And so I was very much involved in all of that. And when Breadbasket started, I met Jesse Jackson, of course, and I didn't know what I could do. He says, "Well, can you sing?" I said, "Well, yeah, I can sing." I was in church choir and everything, and sang at school in the choir. So I became part of Jesse Jackson's first choir, and he'll tell you that today. And so it was during that period that I had this dream, because when we'd go to a Breadbasket meeting, there were 5,000 people there every Saturday morning, and the media were there and in evidence. And ultimately, I worked for SCLC Audio, and I was producing and engineering the live radio broadcasts when I was in high school. But I'd had this dream that at some point I'd be on television, I'd be doing the news, and I'd have a decent career at it, and I wouldn't really have to worry about really stressing over where would I work and what would happen and how would I get from point A to point B, and where does a kid from the south side of Chicago get the idea that he could do that, and whatnot. And lo and behold, my career very much turned out exactly that way. When I came to college, right after the Democratic National Convention in 1968, where I'd been with Dick Gregory.
Another Chicagoan.
Yes. And the march at the Palmer House, and several of my high school classmates were injured by the Chicago police that night. One of them, I'll never forget, I'll get to see her in October. Ellen Irons had her back broken that night. I came to California as Jesse Jackson's first West Coast press secretary. An amazing experience. Came to Pomona College in Claremont, California, which had a radio station, and my roommate, Dave Carnelia, became the program director, and I became the news director of that radio station in our first semester. So we were doing that. I started a production company that was mainly intended to go and record the Southern California Operation Breadbasket meetings, as I had done in Chicago, and later ended up doing all kinds of work, recording speakers and concerts and that sort of thing with my own company, and then feeding material to the radio station. Got involved in that, and it became apparent that there was a radio station in Los Angeles that was black-owned, that Jesse prevailed upon the owner that he needed to do something to serve the community. So why didn't he put Breadbasket meetings on the air? I became the guy to produce those 3-hour meetings and break them down to an hour and put them on the air the next day. He was then prevailed upon to put news about the community on the air, and so I became the guy who sat in that seat and did the newscast along with a guy who's my friend today, Bill Moreland. And we decided that we were going to transform that station's radio news into something that meant something in 1970, 71, when the Black Panther Party was doing what it was doing, and Cesar Chavez was doing what he was doing, and Angela Davis was doing what she was doing, and nobody wanted to talk about it. We wanted to be the people who brought that news to the community of Los Angeles, and it made the owner of the station very crazy. But we persevered, and while doing that, we decided we were going to write our own newscasts and go out and do real interviews. I got heard on the air by the general manager, by the news director of the number 3 radio in Los Angeles at the time, KISS Radio, and called me and said, "We're interested in bringing you
Rock
on
and
board."
roll.
Yeah. If you'd be interested, we'd be interested in having you join our news department. I'm going, me? A little old, KJLH?
Well, first of all, you've got the voice, but
I
go
didn't know
ahead.
that. I thought my voice was horrible. I didn't even want to hear my voice. And when I finally got to KISS, which didn't take that long, I was terrified by the whole situation, and I finally decided I cannot change my voice, so I'm going to go with it. And if they like it, terrific. If they don't, oh well, I'll find something else to do. So I got to KISS, and I didn't audition. I didn't fill out an application. They called me. And suddenly, I was making 5 times the amount of money that I'd been making at KJLH. And that was wonderful. But a year down the line, KISS Radio was sold to a company that didn't want to do evening drive time news. They didn't want it, and that was my shift, evening drive time, which is a choice shift. They only wanted to do news on the weekend. They fired the guy who hired me. And I went back to my dorm room in Claremont, and I said, "Okay, fine, I'll do the weekend news. That's cool. I've got a hot 1971 Dodge Challenger. I redecorated my dorm room.
Yeah,
I
that's
had
about all that was important at that time.
The
I got
big
it.
Koss headphones
Right,
and
right.
the big 10-inch reels on my tape recorder in my room, and the private line. I'm cool, right? I don't need to go through all of that. I'll just be a student. I'll finish my degree, and everything will be hunky-dory. I'll be an economist." I'm sitting in the room, like the day after I left the station, and I've got my feet up on the Ames chair, and I've got a glass of Almaden wine. Remember Almaden wine back in the day?
Oh, wow. No, I'm too young
Oh,
for
you're
that.
too young for that. And I've got the headphones on, and my private line, unlisted number, is ringing. And I'm going, who's calling me? I'm supposed to be retired. Okay, it's a weekend. I should have gone to the keg, but no, I'm sitting in my room listening to music. I finally get up, I answer the phone, and he says to me, and the voice on the other side says, "Is this Lawrence Carroll?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, this is Herb Klein at the White House Office of Communications."
OMG. Oh, my
That's what
goodness.
I said. I'm going, "Yeah, thanks a lot. My name is Donald Duck. Good night. Thank you very much. Goodbye." And I hung up. I sat back in my lounge
You
chair.
literally
I hung
hung up.
Yeah, I knew it was somebody on campus goosing with me. And I put the phones on again, and I'm rocking. I'm having a great time, and I see the light on the phone. It's flashing again. What? I turn off the music, get up, and to go across the room, pick up the phone. It says, I thought I maybe had called the wrong number, but this is Herb Klein in the White House Office of Communications. I'm trying to reach Lawrence Carroll. Do you know him? I says, "Well, that would be me." "And who are you really?" And he says, "Well, this is the White House calling. I'm Herb Klein." And he was the first ever White House communications officer. And he went on to tell me that the White House was interested in hiring me for a position in the White House Office of Communications.
Amazing.
Now, really?
Amazing. But by
So he
this time,
gives me
you're
the-
believing him, though.
No,
At least
I'm
you're
giving him
still-
time to express himself. And I made an appointment to go down to what was the Airport Marina Hotel in Marina del Rey in Los Angeles the following Monday afternoon and talk to some guy who wanted to interview me. So I immediately called up my mom and dad in Chicago, and they're Democrats, and we're talking about the Richard Nixon administration right now, all right? And I said, "Mom, what do you think about this? Is this a scam? I mean, and if it isn't, should I even conscience this?" And she says, "Well, son, keep an open mind and go hear what they have to say," and so on. So I said, "Okay." So I grudgingly, got in my Challenger that following Monday, rolled 40 miles down to Marina del Rey, and who am I sitting across the table from? And they'd taken out all the beds in the hotel rooms in the Airport Marina Hotel and put in desks, but the headboards were still attached to the wall, and above the headboard was a picture of Richard Nixon smiling down at you. And across the table from me was a guy named Lynn Nofziger. Now, I don't know if you know your Watergate history, but if you peel back the layers of the onion of the Watergate history, you'll read that Lynn Nofziger was a major unindicted co-conspirator in the Watergate break-in, a whole scandal. He was central in it. And he interviewed me, and I said, well...
He interviewed you?
He interviewed me. And they wanted me to be the California Director of Broadcast News Bureau Relations for the White House. I was to be the guide, the shepherd, the minder of cabinet members and officials from the White House and from the administration who would come to California and need to have contact with media, with newspapers, with radio and television stations, and they wanted me to handle the radio and television stations. And so that's how I got to meet people like Gerald Ford and John Veneman, the Secretary of Transportation at the time, and John Mitchell, the Attorney General at the time. In fact, on the day of the Watergate break-in, John Mitchell, who was an indicted co-conspirator, was with me in Los Angeles. I'm driving him around from one thing to another and so forth, so I was kind of his alibi. But be that as it may, I joined the White House. And I didn't ask for that job.
Wow, what a story. And I love the way you said it. I joined the White House.
Yeah.
So that is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that lasted until they were asking me to do things that were completely beyond conscience. The mining of Haiphong Harbor.
Give us one example.
I'll give you one. I'll give you a couple. The mining of Haiphong Harbor was a major turning point in the politics of the Vietnam War, having to do with the Nixon administration. And we had mined Haiphong Harbor, and it was a major controversy. And the White House wanted to trumpet that Americans had been writing the White House by the thousands in support of Richard Nixon's policy of mining the harbor at Haiphong in Vietnam. Where do you suppose all those telegrams came from? Boiler rooms in offices like mine, in fact my office, where people were given stacks of phone books where they would choose names and addresses at random and address supportive telegrams to the White House. Not people they knew, not people who knew their names were being used. Just at random, sending telegrams in droves to the White House saying, we support the president's initiative in Vietnam. And they had crowded out my office, so I didn't have space on my desk door. I said, I can't do this, pal. I'm out. Shortly thereafter, there was an anti-war rally on the campus of USC in the big quadrangle where Tommy Trojan stands with his sword. And Jane Fonda was to speak, be among the speakers. Tom Hayden was speaking, and a lot of the key figures of the movement at that time. And there was a plan that the young Republicans from Orange County had built and were going to roll onto the campus a replica tiger cage, a North Vietnamese tiger cage, of the sort that they would hold POWs in, for example. And the plan was, in the middle of that crowd, they would set that on fire, and they would cut Jane Fonda's microphone cable and create chaos on the campus of USC in order to discredit the anti-war movement. That was another thing I refused to participate in early on, and that particular demonstration didn't occur. But then there was the time when I walked into the office to do some work on a Saturday, rode in from Claremont, where I was at college, and I was wearing a pair of blue jeans, which everyone did at the time. I mean, come on, I came out of the Poor People's Campaign, and it was all of a sudden cool to wear denim, but it was ripped. Now, you notice today, people pay extra to buy jeans with rips in them.
Of course.
We were genuine rip people. We had to wear the rips in our jeans, and that was a badge of honor. I wore these jeans in the office, and my girlfriend at the time had tried to sew up one of the holes in the leg of my jeans and put a peace symbol patch on it. And I'm upstairs in my office, and I'm doing things, and I get a phone call. Mr. Nofziger would like to see you in his office. Oh, Lynn's in today. Wasn't that interesting? Okay, fine.
Oh no, you got in trouble for
Oh.
wearing the peace sign
yeah.
on your ripped jeans.
That's right.
Because at that time we wore patches. That was a patch.
Exactly. And this one happened to be covering a whole.
Unbelievable. Oh
And
my goodness.
that's when I separated myself.
Wow. From
the White House.
Washington.
Yeah, from the White House.
Washington. And then so you came back because, oh wow, we're going to have to take another quick station
Okay.
break. But and now what we're going to have to do, first of all, we have to have you back because we're going to have to fast forward this thing like all the way up to now.
Okay.
You're watching Variety Talk Live in Las Vegas. I'm caught up in the story. Variety Talk Live from Las Vegas. I am your host, Linda Leak, and you're sitting in with Mr. Larry Carroll. We'll be right back.